I didn't expect it. I was sitting there, halfway through a quiet dinner, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air, and the sound of my son's laughter lingering in the background. It should have been a peaceful evening, the kind I'd dreamt of since the day my wife passed. But instead the text came, "Get up and go. Your son is in danger." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The text wasn't from any number I recognized, just a strange, anonymous message that had my pulse spiking. My mind scrambled, fighting the urge to panic. What did this mean? My son in danger? I glanced up at him. He was sitting across from me, talking about school, his voice casual, unaware of the storm brewing. A quiet unease settled in my gut. I had no idea what was happening, but something was terribly wrong. Then I looked outside, and I saw it. A strange car parked in front of my house. A black sedan, its headlights dimmed, too still in the middle of the street. I couldn't make out the driver, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Who's that?" I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady, but the crack of panic betrayed me. My son glanced at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I don't know," I said quickly. "Just stay here." I turned to grab my jacket, the words of that text echoing in my mind. I stepped outside into the cool night air. It was October, autumn settling in with the crisp chill of fall wrapping around me like a warning. The street was eerily silent, but that car, it was wrong. Then my phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look at it to know what it would say. "Call your daughter. She sips in on this. Get out now." My heart stopped. My estranged sister Deborah in on this. For years I'd kept my distance. After my wife died, Deborah and I had drifted apart, mostly because of her husband Eric. He'd always been a thorn in my side, trying to manipulate me, trying to take over the family business. But now I was being warned that something darker was happening, and my daughter was involved. I dialed Deborah's number, but as usual, it went straight to voicemail. I didn't have time for her games. She'd always been too busy with her life to care about me or the family, but this was different. I dialed my son's number, desperate to hear his voice, desperate to hear that everything was okay, but there was no answer. The pit in my stomach deepened. I needed to act. I turned back to my son, who was still sitting at the table. His confusion turned into suspicion as he saw the look on my face. "Dad, what's going on?" He sounded like he was bracing himself for bad news. I didn't have time for long explanations. My voice was rough as I grabbed his shoulders. "Listen to me. There's something going on. Someone seps out to hurt you, and I need you to trust me. I seps I'm going to protect you." His eyes searched mine, looking for answers, but all I saw was confusion and fear. "What are you talking about, Dad?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had to stay calm for him. "There's a car outside. Someone's watching us. And I don't know why, but it's connected to your uncle. I know he's been doing something behind my back. Something illegal. He's trying to take what's mine. And now he's using you to get to me." I saw it then, the change in his eyes. The same defiance he always wore like armor, but now it cracked slightly. There was fear, but also something else. Understanding, he could sense it too, that this wasn't just another argument or disagreement. Something dangerous was happening. But before I could say anything else, I heard the sound of a car door slamming outside. I froze. There he was, Eric, my brother-in-law, my rival, the man who'd poisoned this family, who'd played games with me for years. I could feel my pulse racing, but there was no turning back now. He stood at the door, his usual smug grin plastered on his face. "Well, well, Cohen. Looks like I've caught you at a bad time." "Get out," I said, my voice colder than I intended, but it was too late for pleasantries. The weight of everything that had been building up over the years was pressing on me now, and I was done playing nice. Eric stepped inside without an invitation. His presence felt like a suffocating cloud, and I could feel my son's growing discomfort. "I just came to check in on you, Cohen," Eric said, his tone casual, almost too casual. "You know, family stuff." I stared at him, a surge of anger rushing through me. "Family? You don't stos get to call yourself family anymore. You stos the one who spes been scheming behind my back, trying to destroy everything I Seth built. Eric Sepp's smile didn't bow palter. That's Sepp's funny. I thought I was the one trying to help. It's Sepp's not my fault. You can Sepp's handle the business, Cohen. Maybe it's Sepp's time you step aside and let someone else, someone more capable, take over. My blood ran cold. He wanted the business. He wanted everything that had been my life's work. But it wasn't just the business, it was my son, too. Eric had been feeding him lies for years, and now he was trying to pull him deeper into his web. I took a step toward him. My fists clenched. You don't know what you supper playing with, Eric. This isn't supper a game anymore. You supper gone too far, and I supper done letting you destroy my family. He didn't net back down, his eyes flashing with that familiar smugness. Oh, I know exactly what I sup doing. You should sup thought about that before you started making moves against me. This wasn't just about the family business anymore. This wasn't just about saving my son. It was about taking back control. It was about revenge. The type of revenge that would make sure Eric never hurt me or anyone I loved again. I couldn't sleep that night. The weight of what had happened, Eric's visit, his words, his cold, calculating stare kept me awake, running through every detail in my head. What had I missed? What else was going on behind my back? The questions gnawed at me as I stared at the ceiling, the silence of the house feeling too loud. The car outside was still there, parked across the street. My son had gone to bed, but I knew he wasn't sleeping either. The tension was suffocating, and I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. I kept thinking about what Eric had said, how he'd subtly threatened me, how he was trying to push me out of the business. My business, this was bigger than just an argument. This was about control, and he wasn't just trying to take the garage. No, he wanted it all. The family wealth, the legacy that my wife and I had built together. The next morning I couldn't stay still. The business wasn't going to run itself, but it didn't matter. I had to know more. I had to know what Eric had done, and what he was planning next. My mind raced through the documents I'd kept hidden away. The receipts, the old financials, the emails between me and the accountant that showed how Eric had been siphoning money off the business for months. My hands trembled as I went through them. One by one, the more I dug, the more I saw how deep this went. It wasn't just about money, it was about power. I made the call to my lawyer, an old friend who had always had my back. I didn't trust many people anymore, but I trusted him. Cohen, you sound tense. What's going on? He asked, as soon as he picked up. It's Eric, I said, keeping my voice low. I glanced at my son's bedroom door, making sure he couldn't hear. I think he's been using the business for his own gain. I've found evidence, hidden transactions, withdrawals. It's all there, but I need you to help me find more. I need to know exactly what he's been doing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could tell he was processing it. All right. I'll get my team on it. But Cohen, be careful. This isn't SEP just about a business dispute anymore. You're dealing with someone who SEP's been playing this game longer than you. I hung up and sat there, the weight of his words sinking in. Eric wasn't just a brother-in-law. He was a shark, a predator, and I was the prey he'd been circling for years. But no more. I wasn't going to just sit back and let him take everything. But there was something else weighing on me. My son, ever since his mother passed, we'd drifted apart. I'd been so wrapped up in the grief in trying to keep the business afloat that I'd neglected him. Now I could see the damage. The walls between us had only grown taller, and Eric, he knew exactly how to take advantage of that. He'd been filling my son's head with lies, using him to turn against me. I could see it in his eyes when he looked at me. Doubt, confusion. I couldn't let this happen. Not again. The phone call from my daughter was unexpected. Deborah, the one person I thought I'd lost for good. Dad? Her voice was hesitant, almost too careful. I know things between us have been difficult, but I need to talk to you about Eric. My heart skipped a beat. What about him? She hesitated. I could hear her take a breath. I didn't know what he was doing, not until recently. And I need your help. The betrayal I felt from her, from all of them, was still fresh, but hearing her voice now was like a crack in the wall that had been built between us. She wanted help? She needed me? Come over, Deborah. We'll figure this out, I said. There was no hesitation in my voice. Within an hour, she was standing in front of me, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed as if she hadn't slept in days. I could see it now, the same fear in her eyes that I'd felt all those years ago when I'd watched my life crumble in the wake of my wife's death. I'm sorry, Dad, she said, the words coming out in a rush. I didn't realize what he was doing. But now I know Eric Sepp's been manipulating us all. Sepp's seen the proof and Sepp's tried to stop him, but Sepp's not strong enough. I stared at her, the realization hitting me like a sledgehammer. She knew, she had known for longer than I had. Why didn't you come to me sooner? The question came out before I could stop it. She lowered her eyes, guilt evident in the way her shoulders slumped. I was scared, Dad. I didn't think you believe me. Eric, he good at making people doubt themselves. Set's always been able to twist things. I felt a tight knot in my chest. I should have been there for her, I should have known. But now wasn't the time for regrets. Now was the time to act. We fix this, I said, my voice steady, even though inside everything was crumbling. Together we take him down. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and a quiet, simmering rage I could hardly contain. I kept thinking about the damage Eric had caused, how he'd wormed his way into every crack in my family. His influence had stretched so far I couldn't even recognize my own flesh and blood anymore, but that would change. I was done letting him pull the strings. Deborah's revelation was the first break I'd gotten. At first I didn't trust her. How could I? After everything, after the betrayal, the lies, but she was the only ally I had left. She had proof. Emails, text messages, everything I needed to build my case. I set up a meeting with my lawyer, John. We'd been friends for years, ever since college, and I knew he could be trusted. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough to help me navigate this mess. As soon as he saw the stack of papers I'd collected, his face darkened. This is bad, Cohen. This is more than just a family squabble. It's criminal. I nodded, gripping the edge of the table. I'd seen the signs, illegal withdrawals, discrepancies in business records, and emails from Eric asking for loans that were never repaid. This wasn't just about the garage, it was about something bigger. Eric had been embezzling funds, using the family business as a front to funnel money into his own pockets. But that wasn't all. What else? John asked, leaning forward. There's more to this, right? I hesitated. The words felt like lead in my mouth. My son Alex, Sepp's involved somehow. Eric Sepp's been blackmailing him. John Sepp's eyebrows shot up. Your son? I nodded, swallowing hard. Alex isn't Sepp the same since his mother died. Sepp's been vulnerable, angry, and Eric Sepp's been using that. Sepp's been feeding him lies, turning him against me, using him to get close to the business. John sighed, running a hand over his face. This is worse than I thought. We need to hit him hard, Cohen. We need undeniable evidence. You need to get everything you can, bank records, emails, surveillance footage. If we don't have everything in place, he'll just walk away with no consequences. I knew John was right. I had to be meticulous. This wasn't just about exposing Eric, it was about saving my family, saving what little was left of my dignity. I couldn't lose the garage, and I couldn't let Eric take my son from me. Later that night, after John had left, I went through everything Deborah had given me. The emails, the receipts, the bank records. There it all was, staring back at me, clear as day. Eric had been siphoning off money for months, making shady investments with the family funds. But it was the blackmail letters that struck me hardest. One of the letters had been addressed to Alex. The tone was chilling, a demand for money in exchange for silence. It was like a punch in the gut. I could see it now, how Eric had played on Alex's insecurities, how he'd used his vulnerability to manipulate him into doing his bidding. This was the part that broke me. The realization that my own flesh and blood had been dragged into this mess. I sat there for hours, trying to piece everything together. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help, and I needed it fast. I reached out to Deborah again, asking her to meet me. This was the point of no return. If we were going to expose Eric, we had to go all in. When Deborah arrived, she didn't say much at first. She knew the stakes. She knew how much this would cost us, emotionally and legally. I don't know if I can keep doing this, she said quietly, her hands shaking as she handed me a folder. But we have to stop him, Cohen. I won't let him destroy this family any longer. I opened the folder. Inside was everything I needed: tax records, bank statements, evidence of money laundering, and a timeline of every illegal withdrawal Eric had made over the last year. This was it. I had the proof I needed to bring him down. I looked up at Deborah. This isn't Sepp just about the money anymore. It's Sepp's about making sure he pays for what Sepp's done to us, to Alex. Deborah nodded, her face set with determination. You have to take him down, Cohen. For all of us. For your son. And just like that, everything changed. This wasn't just about exposing Eric, it was about reclaiming control. It was about getting my family back. I wasn't going to let him win. That night, I sat down with John again, going through the details, preparing the legal documents. We had a plan now. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only option. We were going to hit Eric where it hurt: his money, his reputation, his control. I wasn't just going to bring him down. I was going to make sure he never hurt anyone again. But there was still a problem, Alex. I didn't know how to approach him. The thought of confronting him about the blackmail, about the lies Eric had fed him, tore me apart. He'd been through so much already. I didn't want to lose him. Not like this. But I knew what I had to do. I had to fight for him, for us. It wasn't a war of loud confrontations or public showdowns. It was a quiet, methodical campaign. Every move I made, every decision had to be precise. Eric had been playing the long game, so I was going to do the same. But this time I was the one calling the shots. The first step was to get my hands on more information, something I could use to choke the life out of his empire without him ever seeing it coming. I spent nights going through old company ledgers, digging through tax records, and tracking financial transactions, every withdrawal, every suspicious charge. It was all there, buried in the numbers, just waiting for someone to pull it out into the light. I enlisted John's help, of course. He'd been invaluable in advising me on the legal side, making sure I didn't do anything that could be used against me later. We had a quiet operation going, carefully collecting evidence. One evening, John met me at my garage office to go over the latest findings. "You stir getting close," he said as he flipped through the papers. I handed him, "but we need something concrete. Something that said'll stick. You know as well as I do that Eric will try to cover his tracks." "I know," I muttered. I couldn't shake the feeling that Eric was one step ahead, always watching, always calculating. I had to stay sharp. There was more to this than just the financials. I knew Eric's weaknesses, and I wasn't above exploiting them. His arrogance was his biggest flaw. He thought he had everything under control: my business, my family, even my son. But he underestimated me. He didn't realize how much I had learned over the years, how much I had been watching. It was time for him to feel that pressure. I decided to start small, subtle moves that would make him question everything. The first thing I did was manipulate one of his business deals. Nothing drastic, but enough to make him sweat. I used my connections to leak information about a bad investment, a shady project he was involved in that could ruin his reputation. Word spread fast, and within days Eric's phone was blowing up with calls from angry investors. When I saw the first signs of his paranoia, when I noticed the way he kept checking his bank statements, the way he began canceling meetings and scrambling to cover his tracks, I knew I had him. But it wasn't just business anymore, it was personal. Eric had taken something from me that I couldn't get back: the love of my family, my son. The one thing that had kept me going all these years, and now my son was starting to realize what Eric had done. Slowly, he was beginning to see the truth, to understand the lies he'd been fed. One night, I sat down with Alex in the kitchen. He didn't say much at first, his gaze flicking to the floor, his hands nervously fiddling with the edge of his sleeve, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. "You've been distant lately," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know what's going on, Alex. I know Eric has been filling your head with lies. You don't have to believe him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, his expression a mix of fear and confusion. I don't set know what to believe, Dad. I don't set know who to trust anymore. I could feel the knot in my chest tightening. This wasn't just about Eric anymore. This was about me. I'd been so focused on fighting him that I'd neglected the one person who needed me the most. "I'm sorry, Alex," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I failed you. I been so wrapped up in everything else that I lost sight of what matters most. But I not going to let Eric destroy us. I will fight for you. I will fight for this family." He didn't answer right away, but there was a shift in his eyes, a glimmer of understanding, maybe even hope. "I know, Dad," he finally whispered. I just, I don't know where I fit into all this." "You fit right here," I said, stepping closer. "You stutch, my son, and I shall always be here for you, no matter what. We shall take this down together, but I need you to trust me. You have to trust that I shall doing this for all of us." For a moment we just stood there, the weight of everything between us. But then he nodded. "I trust you." It was the first step, the first real step toward mending what had been broken between us, and it wasn't going to be easy. It was going to take time. But it was a start. As I walked back to my office later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle had only just begun. Eric was still out there, still trying to pull the strings. But now I had a weapon, my son, and he wasn't just the pawn in Eric's game anymore. He was my ally. I smiled grimly to myself. It wasn't going to be easy, but I would win. This was my fight, and I wasn't about to lose it. The final confrontation loomed closer every day. I could feel the tension rising like a pressure cooker, the walls closing in around Eric. He had no idea what was coming. His arrogance had always been his greatest strength, and now it was going to be his downfall. I'd spent the last few months playing my cards carefully, waiting for the right moment to strike. But now, the pieces were in place. It was time to make my move. I met with John again. We had gathered everything we needed, evidence of Eric's financial fraud, a paper trail long enough to send him to prison for years. But the legal battle wouldn't be enough. I needed more than that. I needed him to be exposed publicly in front of the family. I wanted everyone to see who he really was. I wanted to make him bleed, emotionally, mentally, and financially. "This is it," John said, as he handed me a final set of documents. "The tax records, the blackmail letters, the business transactions, everything steps here. If we go public with this, it'll be a full-blown scandal. He won't be able to hide anymore." I nodded, taking the papers from him. "It's just time to take him down." But there was still the matter of my son, Alex. I couldn't drag him into this without preparing him. I needed him to see the truth about Eric, about me, and about everything that had been hidden for so long. I knew it was going to hurt him, but the truth always does. And sometimes you have to break something in order to rebuild it. I called him into my office that afternoon, the door shutting quietly behind him. He stood there, looking like a boy caught between two worlds. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the loyalty he still felt toward Eric, mixed with the growing sense that everything he'd been told was a lie. "Alex, I need you to understand something." I started, my voice firm but gentle. "Eric Sepp's been manipulating you. Everything he Sepp's told you, everything he Sepp's promised you. It's all been lies. He Sepp's been using you, using your trust to take what Sepp's mine, what Sepp's ours." He looked at me, his jaw tight. "You Setra saying everything Sepp's been a lie?" "Everything." I Sepp's been gathering evidence. It's not just the business, Alex. It's your future. He Sepp's been blackmailing you, using your weakness against you. I know it's hard to hear, but this is the truth." Alex stood there, his eyes wide with disbelief, struggling to process the weight of my words. I could see the anger building behind his eyes, the confusion mixing with hurt. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice cracking. I stepped closer, trying to close the distance between us. "I was trying to protect you, Alex. I didn't set to know how deep Eric Sepp's control had gone until it was too late. But now we can fight back, together." For a long moment he didn't speak. I could see the emotions warring within him, betrayal, confusion, and anger. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but he had to make a choice. And in that moment I hoped he would choose the right side. Finally he spoke. "I want to take him down, Dad. I sep one with you." My heart swelled with relief. It wasn't just the fight that mattered, it was the fact that my son had finally seen the truth. He wasn't lost to me. Not yet. The Thanksgiving dinner was fast approaching. It was the perfect time to reveal everything. The family would be gathered under one roof, and I knew Eric wouldn't expect the storm that was coming. My plan was simple: expose him in front of everyone, lay out all the evidence, and make him own up to his lies. It was time for justice. The day of the dinner, I was calm. The tension was still there, of course, but I felt a quiet sense of resolve. This wasn't just about taking Eric down, it was about taking back control of my life, my business, my family. The family gathered around the dinner table as the evening progressed. The smell of turkey and pie filled the room, and the laughter sounded almost normal. But I knew better. This dinner wasn't just another family gathering, it was the beginning of the end for Eric. I had arranged for John to be there, along with a few trusted allies who had helped me gather the evidence. I couldn't do this alone. As the evening wore on, I could feel the weight of the moment building. Eric was his usual smug self, playing the part of the doting uncle, cracking jokes and pretending like everything was fine. But I knew better. He was about to lose everything, and he didn't even know it yet. Finally, when the moment was right, I stood up. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. "Everyone," I began, my voice steady, "I have something to say." Eric's smirk faltered for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. "I've been watching you, Eric, and I've been collecting evidence. Evidence of your lies, your manipulation, your greed. You have been stealing from this family, using my son, and tearing apart everything Isef worked for. Yusef betrayed every one of us." The silence in the room was suffocating. I laid out the documents, the financial records, the blackmail letters, the emails, everything. It all fell onto the table in front of him, like a weight he couldn't escape. "You start finished," I said, my voice low but filled with resolve. "The truth is out." Eric's face turned pale as he looked at the evidence, his eyes flicking from the papers to my face. The arrogance that had defined him for so long crumbled, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. The tension at the table was suffocating. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy, pressing down on everyone. Eric sat there, frozen, his face pale as he stared at the evidence I had laid out before him. The room was dead silent, every pair of eyes trained on him, waiting for him to say something, anything. But there was nothing. The smug, arrogant man who had walked into this room just hours ago had disappeared, replaced by someone who looked like he was about to crumble under the weight of his own lies. I could see it now, the fear, the desperation clawing at him. This was it. His empire, his lies, everything he'd worked for, all of it was crumbling in front of him. My son Alex stood off to the side, his eyes wide, his body tense as he took in the scene. He was still processing everything. He'd known something was wrong, but this was beyond what I'd hoped he would ever have to witness. "Eric," I said, my voice firm but not without a certain satisfaction, "You've been siphoning money from the business, blackmailing my son, and poisoning my family with your lies for far too long. It ends tonight." Eric opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat worked as if he were trying to form a sentence, but the realization had clearly hit him too hard. There was no way out of this. "Cohen, this isn't Sep what you think," Eric finally stammered, his voice shaking. "You Sep got it all wrong." I scoffed. "Wrong? You think I don't set know you, Eric? You said been pulling the strings behind the scenes for years, and now it Sep's all coming to light. The truth doesn't set lie, Eric. Not like your manipulations." Alex stepped forward, his voice quiet but trembling. "Dad, is this really true?" His eyes darted between the papers and me, the weight of everything still sinking in. I nodded, my heart aching. "It Sep's true, son. Everything I Sep been trying to protect you from, it Sep's all been a lie." Alex turned to Eric, his voice growing louder now. "You used me. All this time you were just using me to get to my dad Seppa's business. My future, I thought you cared about me. I trusted you. Eric flinched as if Alex's words were a physical blow. He opened his mouth, trying to justify himself, but nothing came out. His entire facade had shattered, and all that was left was the man who had been hiding behind it for so long. Look at him, Eric, I said, my voice rising, the weight of everything I sipped and holding inside coming to the surface. Look at my son, the one person you Sepp destroyed. You used him, manipulated him, turned him against me. And for what? For money? For control? All of it was for nothing. The room was still, save for the quiet sound of breathing, the weight of the moment hanging over us all. I had won. But there was no victory in this. No joy in seeing someone you once called family crumble before your eyes. Eric, now visibly sweating, looked around the room, his eyes shifting from face to face. He could feel the walls closing in, the judgment, the betrayal from everyone around him. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he whispered, the words coming out ragged as if he were pleading for forgiveness. I just wanted what was mine. I thought I deserved it. I shook my head. You don't deserve anything. You took what wasn't sister yours, and you used your family to get it. You don't to get to play the victim now. Not after everything you sister done. The room was still, the silence more deafening than any words could be. Alex took a step closer to me, his face still a mixture of anger and disbelief. What happens now? He asked, his voice small, uncertain. I looked at him, my heart heavy. Now, now we take back what Sip's ours. We expose him for everything he Sip's done. We take everything he Sip's built and burn it to the ground. Eric's face paled even further. You can't do this, you'll regret it, he spat. But there was no conviction in his words. His arrogance had dissolved into fear. He could see the writing on the wall. There was no way out. I already regret not doing this sooner, I said quietly, my voice steady. But now it sets time for you to face the consequences. Not just for what you set done to me, but for what you set done to my son, to this family. I turned to Alex. This is what he Sip's been hiding from you. This is the man he Sip's been pretending to be. But now you know the truth. You Sip's free from his lies. And you Sip's free from the chains he tried to bind you with. Alex looked at me, the anger still in his eyes, but there was something else there now. Something more complicated. His hands trembled, but there was a spark of realization in his expression. He finally understood. I'm done with him, he said, his voice low but resolute. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief, not because of what had happened, but because my son was finally free. Free from the lies, free from Eric's grip. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was a start, a painful, difficult start, but a start nonetheless. Eric stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You don't know what you're doing, he yelled. But it was too late. The family had already seen the truth, and the truth was more than enough to destroy him. I turned to the others at the table, all of them silent, their eyes on Eric. I said, make sure everyone knows who he really is. I said, my voice hard. This ends tonight, for good. As Eric stood there, broken and desperate, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served, not with the blood and fury of revenge, but with the cold certainty of truth. The aftermath of the dinner felt like a slow-motion disaster unfolding before my eyes. The room had been quiet, too quiet as the reality of what had just happened settled in. Eric's disgrace hung in the air like a thick fog. He hadn't said a word after I laid out the evidence, just stood there shaking, trying to process his defeat. His entire world had just crumbled, and there was nothing left for him to hide behind. But the consequences weren't just for Eric. No, the fallout from this would hit everyone. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. It was a reckoning. Everything I'd worked so hard to build, everything I had sacrificed was on the line. And while I felt a sense of relief, it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of what lay ahead. Eric didn't leave the dinner right away. He lingered as if trying to find some last ounce of dignity, some way to salvage whatever he had left. But there was nothing left for him. The damage had been done. My son, Alex, stayed by my side throughout it all, though I could tell he was still processing everything. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that the man he'd looked up to had been nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing. "You okay?" I asked, my voice low, trying to break through the silence between us. Alex didn't immediately respond. His eyes were focused on his hands, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a child. Finally, he looked up, meeting my gaze. There was pain in his eyes, a raw hurt that I knew wasn't going to heal overnight. "I don't know, Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. This is all just too much." I nodded, understanding. How could it not be? This wasn't just about a family business or a power struggle. It was about trust, about love, and the destruction of everything he had once believed to be true. But it wasn't over, not yet. "We shall get through this, Alex," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You and me. I know it seems hard, but we have to rebuild. We have to move forward." Alex nodded slowly, though I could see the doubt still lingering in his eyes. He wasn't ready to forgive, and honestly, neither was I. But we had to start somewhere. Across the table, Deborah was still sitting there, her face pale, her expression distant. I could tell she was struggling with her own feelings. Guilt, regret, shame. She'd known about Eric's manipulation, but she'd stayed silent. She'd chosen to believe his lies, to turn a blind eye to the damage he was causing, and now she had to live with the fallout of that decision. I walked over to her, my steps heavy. "Deborah," I said quietly, my voice soft but firm, "this doesn't set end here. We still have a long road ahead of us. You have to be ready to face the consequences of your own actions, too." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded, a broken look in her eyes. I didn't need an apology. I needed her to understand that the damage had been done, and the only way forward was through accountability. The next few days were a blur. The police arrived as expected. Eric had tried to flee, but his desperation only made things worse. We had gathered enough evidence to bring him down, but the real challenge was ensuring that he faced the legal consequences. And when I say we, I mean everyone. John, my allies, even Deborah, who had finally stepped up and given a full account of everything she knew. Eric was arrested, but that didn't bring an end to the chaos. The family was torn apart. The business had been damaged, its reputation in tatters. My son and I were left picking up the pieces of our fractured relationship. "Are you sure this is what you want?" John had asked me over the phone after the police had taken Eric away. "You sipped, you're exposing your family to the world, Cohen. This isn't Aristot, just a legal fight. It's Septure, a public one." I'd thought about that for a long time. Was this really worth it? "I didn't said have a choice," I replied. "He took everything from me. He took everything from us. And I said not going to let him walk away without paying for it." But the question lingered. Was justice worth the price we'd paid? Would anything ever be the same again? As I sat in the quiet of my office, the weight of it all settled on my shoulders. The business was mine again, but it felt hollow. What good was success if it came at the cost of everything else? And yet, there was Alex. He was starting to understand the complexity of the situation. The anger was still there, but I could see him thinking it through. He wasn't the same boy who had walked into this mess. A few days later, after the dust had settled and the police had wrapped up their investigation, I sat down with him again. "I know things are different now," I said, my voice rough. "But we have a chance to make it right, Alex. It won't set be easy. It's sep's going to take time, but we set rebuild together." He looked at me. The tension still in his face, but something had shifted. The coldness was gone. There was understanding now, even if it was tentative. "I'm ready, Dad," he said quietly, the words simple but full of meaning. In that moment, I knew we would be okay. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be enough. We had the truth, we had each other, and that, in the end, was what mattered most. The weeks after the fallout felt like a slow, grinding process. Eric's arrest was the first step, but it wasn't the end. I was left with the wreckage, the emotional debris of everything that had come crashing down. The family was in tatters, my sister, my son, and I. Eric was locked away, but the damage he had done was far deeper than I had ever imagined. The business, once thriving, was now on shaky ground. The news of the scandal had spread faster than I expected. Whispers of financial fraud, blackmail, and family betrayal rippled through the community, and the reputation I'd worked my entire life to build was in jeopardy. Clients were pulling back, investments were slowing, and the employees who had once stood by me now looked at me with a mix of sympathy and uncertainty. I stood in the garage, staring at the rows of cars. This was supposed to be my legacy, the business that would carry my name, the one I'd built from the ground up. But now I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, wondering if it was even worth climbing back up. Alex had been distant. He was still processing everything, and I knew it wasn't just Eric's betrayal that was eating at him. It was the loss of trust, the years we'd spent apart. He hadn't forgiven me yet, not fully. He was trying, but I could see the cracks in our relationship. It wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. The scars from everything that had happened, my grief, my neglect, were too deep to erase with a few conversations. I decided to take matters into my own hands. If I was going to rebuild, I needed to start with the foundation. I reached out to a few key clients, explaining the situation, reassuring them that the business was still stable, still secure. I didn't expect all of them to return, but I had to try. But the real challenge was the emotional toll. Every day it felt like I was carrying the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the broken relationships. It was as if the world had gone silent, and all I could hear was the heavy, relentless beat of my own heart. One evening I decided to visit Alex. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I needed to try again. I needed to make him understand that this wasn't just about the business, about the money. It was about us as a family. And if we couldn't repair that, then everything else was meaningless. When I knocked on his door, he answered with that same guarded expression, the one that said he wasn't ready to let me in. But I didn't back down. I sup. Sorry, Alex, I said, my voice hoarse. I know I haven't been there for you. I know I failed you, and I can take that back. But I trying to make it right. I trying to fix everything. Alex didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, his arms crossed. It's not that simple, Dad, he replied, his voice low. You don't just get to apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. I don't know how to trust you anymore. His words cut deeper than I expected, but they were the truth. I'd spent so long focused on the business, on trying to keep everything together, that I'd neglected the one thing that truly mattered. I know, I said, taking a step closer, but I here now. And I not going anywhere. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I need you to know that I not giving up. I going to keep fighting for this family. For us, I do whatever it takes. Alex looked at me for a long time, his eyes searching mine as if trying to gauge whether I meant what I said. Finally, he nodded. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I'm willing to try. That was all I needed. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start. We would rebuild piece by piece, one day at a time. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Eric's trial was coming up, and though he was behind bars for now, there was still a sense of unfinished business. He had ruined so much, his greed had torn apart everything I'd spent my life building. The thought of seeing him in court, facing the consequences of his actions, filled me with a strange mix of anger and relief. He deserved everything that was coming to him, but I didn't know if it would be enough. It wasn't just about punishment anymore. I realized that the true price of justice wasn't in the courtrooms or in Eric's conviction. It was in us. It was in the people left behind, the ones who had to pick up the pieces of our broken lives, and that was the hardest part. As the trial date loomed closer, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the choices I had made, and in the quiet of those moments I understood something. I had lost so much in this fight, but what I hadn't lost was my will to fight for what was right. I wasn't just fighting for my family anymore. I was fighting for myself, for my dignity, for my peace of mind, and for the future I wanted to build with Alex. The past had shaped me, yes, but it wouldn't define me. I had come to realize that the price of justice wasn't just about taking down the person who wronged you. It was about finding peace with yourself, no matter the cost, and that peace, it was something Eric could never take from me. It's strange how quiet everything becomes once the dust settles. The noise, the shouting, the chaos, the constant feeling of being on the edge of something starts to fade, and you're left with the emptiness, the silence, and the weight of everything that's been lost. I thought I knew what it meant to fight for justice, to seek revenge, but nothing could have prepared me for the aftermath. Eric's trial had come and gone. The courtroom had been filled with tension, the air thick with anger and relief. As his lies were peeled back layer by layer, his once confident facade had crumbled, revealing the broken, desperate man beneath. But despite the sense of victory that came with his conviction, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. There was no real peace in seeing him behind bars, no satisfaction in knowing that the world would see him for what he truly was. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a long drawn-out war with no real victor. I still had my business, but it felt hollow, like a shadow of what it once was. The garage that had once been a symbol of everything I'd built, my blood, sweat, and tears, was now a constant reminder of everything I'd lost in the process. But it wasn't just the business. It was the family. It was the years that had slipped away, the moments I couldn't get back, the years I'd spent grieving, working, and pushing my son away, the years I'd wasted on revenge, believing that it was the only thing that could heal the wound Eric had inflicted on me. And in the end, I realized it was never about the money or the business, or even Eric himself. It was about the trust I had lost, the relationships I had broken, the father I had failed to be. I sat at my desk one evening going through some old photos of me and Alex. We used to be close. He was just a kid, full of life and laughter. Before all of this, before the darkness of Eric's betrayal had crept into our lives, before my grief had pulled me away from him, I looked at those photos, at the man I used to be, and I wondered how I'd gotten so far off course. It wasn't just Eric who had destroyed my family. It was me. I had been so focused on protecting what I had left, on fighting for a business that I thought defined me, that I had lost sight of what really mattered. My son, my daughter, my wife, who was gone. They were the ones who had needed me, and I had failed them. But it wasn't set too late. Not yet. I stood up and walked over to the window, the cool autumn breeze brushing against my face. The leaves had started to turn, the colors shifting from green to gold. Fall was always a time of change, of letting go of the old and making room for the new, and I realized that's what I needed to do. Let go of the past, of the bitterness, of the anger that had consumed me. Let go of the idea that revenge was the answer. I turned back to the desk, where the phone sat silently. It was time. Time to pick up the pieces of my life. Time to make amends with my son. Time to rebuild. The truth had been exposed. Eric had been brought to justice, and now it was up to me to move forward. I called Alex that night. He answered after the second ring, his voice quieter than usual. "Hey, Dad," he said, his tone distant, but there was something different about it, something softer, less guarded. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice steady but full of the emotions I had kept hidden for so long, "about everything, about what happened, about how things went down. And I realize I've made mistakes. I haven't been the father you needed. I've been so focused on trying to fix everything that I forgot what really matters." There was silence on the other end of the line. A long pause, as if Alex were processing my words. I could feel the weight of the years between us, the distance, the hurt, but I also felt the flicker of something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "I know, Dad," he said quietly. "I know you sept trying, and I don't sept know if I can forgive you yet. But I sep'm willing to try. I sep'm just not sure how things can go back to normal." "They once set," I said, my voice soft. "But they don't set have to. We still take it one step at a time, Alex. One day at a time." He didn't say anything for a while, and I could feel the uncertainty hanging in the air. But when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable than I had ever heard it. "I still try, Dad. I sup not there yet, but I supped try. That was enough. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start, and that was all I could ask for. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding the business, mending the broken bonds, reclaiming my family, it would take time. It would take patience. But it was worth it. I had a second chance, a chance to fix what I had broken, and this time I wouldn't let it slip away. I stood by the window for a long time after the call ended, the weight of everything finally starting to lift. Justice had been served, but it wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning, and this time I was ready to write the next chapter. The weeks that followed felt like a slow recovery, a battle to regain what had been lost and build something new from the wreckage. Eric was gone, locked away where he belonged, but his presence still haunted us. His betrayal had torn apart so much, and the scars were still there, fading but never truly disappearing. I kept busy, trying to focus on rebuilding the garage, restoring what I could of the family business. The clients who had remained were loyal, and I could feel the community rallying around me, offering support. But it wasn't enough. I knew it would take time to heal, time to rebuild trust, and time to make sure Eric's shadow no longer loomed over me. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated, the change in Alex. He had grown distant again. It wasn't anger this time. It was something quieter, something more difficult to name. He was carrying a weight of his own, the result of everything that had happened, the emotional toll of the betrayal, the manipulation and the fight for control. It had taken its toll on him. I knew it, even though he wasn't saying it. I tried to reach out, but he was always just out of arm's reach. The conversations were stilted, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. Every time I tried to explain, to apologize, it felt like we were only moving further apart. The space between us seemed to grow wider, despite my best efforts to close the gap. One evening I sat in the office, my mind racing with everything that needed to be done, plans for the future, paperwork, invoices, the usual grind that had always kept me busy. But tonight something was different. There was a heaviness in the air, something I couldn't ignore. The door opened, and Alex stepped inside. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. It was as if he was finally ready to talk, to face whatever had been weighing on him. He stood there for a moment, his posture tense, before finally speaking. "I've been thinking, Dad," he said, his voice low but steady, "about everything, about how things went down, about you and me. And I think we need to talk about what steps next." I felt a breath I hadn't realized I was holding leave me in a rush. He stepped closer, sitting across from me, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I've been mad at you. I've been angry about everything that happened, about how you weren't there when I needed you. I've been thinking about it all, and I realize now that you weren't just failing me. You were failing yourself, too. You were so caught up in fighting Eric and protecting the business that you lost sight of what really mattered, and that's on both of us." I sat back, the weight of his words settling in. The truth hurt. It stung. And yet it was a relief to hear him finally speak the truth about what we had both been avoiding. "I get it now, Dad," Alex continued, his eyes meeting mine. "I know you weren't trying to push me away. You were just trying to hold on to what you thought was all that mattered. But we lost so much. I lost so much." I could see the tears threatening to well in his eyes, but he held them back, the weight of everything too much to bear all at once. I wanted to say something, to offer comfort, but I couldn't find the words. So much had been broken between us, and I wasn't sure where to begin. "I'm sorry, Alex," I whispered. "I was so focused on trying to fix everything that I didn't see how much I was losing in the process. I failed you, and I failed to keep failing you if I don't change. But I want to fix this. I want to fix us." He nodded slowly, the tears still there, just barely held back. "I know you do, Dad. And I am not saying everything is going to be okay right away, but I am willing to try. I am willing to work through this with you. But it's not going to be easy. We're both going to have to do the work." I stood up, walking over to him, and for the first time in years I reached out and pulled him into a hug. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't the closure I'd imagined, the easy resolution to everything we'd been through. But it was enough. In that moment, I realized that rebuilding wasn't about fixing everything in one go. It was about taking small steps, facing the pain, and moving forward even when it seemed impossible. Alex wasn't the only one who needed to heal. I did too. As we pulled away from each other, I could see a flicker of hope in his eyes. It wasn't the same as before, but it was a start, a new beginning, a chance to finally rebuild the broken pieces of our relationship. We will still get through this, I said softly, together. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. It was slow, but it was real. Alex and I started to rebuild our relationship. There were still moments of tension, moments of silence that spoke louder than words, but we were working through it, one day at a time. And the garage? It was starting to find its footing again, too. Slowly but surely, the reputation I had worked so hard to build was coming back. The business was strong, the clients were returning, and the future seemed a little brighter than it had before. But more than anything, I realized that the real victory wasn't in reclaiming the business or seeing Eric behind bars. The real victory was in the healing, the chance to fix what was broken, and that was a fight worth fighting for. Just when I thought I had everything in hand, when I thought the dust had finally settled, the last twist came. The final piece of the puzzle was not something I had expected. I had spent so long focused on Eric, on the battle to take him down, that I failed to see the final irony of this entire ordeal. It all started with an unexpected visit. Someone I hadn't heard from in years. Someone who had quietly disappeared from the story. It was a call from someone I didn't recognize at first, but their voice was familiar. "Cohen," the voice said, calm and measured. "I think it's Satch's time we talked." I sat up straight, the weight of the voice hitting me harder than I expected. "Who is this?" "An old friend of Eric Sepp's. And yours too, actually. We need to talk about what Sepp's coming next." My mind immediately raced. Another ally of Eric's? Someone who had been playing in the shadows all this time. My instincts screamed for me to refuse the call, to hang up. But curiosity and a deep sense of unfinished business forced me to stay on the line. "I'm listening," I said, my voice tight, trying to keep the edge of anger from slipping through. "I have been watching everything unfold," the voice continued. "And I think you still want to know this. Eric was in Anstott working alone. He had help. And it wasn't Anstott just from family." A cold shiver ran down my spine. What did that mean? Who else had been involved in this scheme? Who else had played a part in destroying my family? "Who are you talking about?" I demanded, my pulse racing. My mind immediately flashed to people I knew, people I trusted or thought I trusted, but nothing prepared me for the next words. "Someone you know very well, Cohen. Someone you've known for a long time. Someone who knew the ins and outs of your business, who had access to everything. Your old lawyer, John." My stomach dropped. John, the one man I had trusted more than anyone. The man who had stood by me through every dark moment of this battle. The man who had been helping me gather evidence, preparing me for the final showdown. And now I was being told he was in on it all along. The betrayal was suffocating. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I had spent so much time focusing on Eric and his schemes, never once thinking that the betrayal could run deeper. The realization that my lawyer, my friend, had been playing both sides, feeding information to Eric while pretending to help me, hit harder than anything else I'd endured. It was the ultimate twist, the final betrayal that shattered everything. The voice on the phone continued, calm as ever. "You've been played, Cohen? John had a hand in everything. He was the one who helped Eric with the financials, covered up his tracks, made sure the evidence you were collecting wouldn't hold up. It was him, all along." I felt dizzy, disoriented, my thoughts spinning out of control. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the signs? John had been the one I trusted with everything, the one who had helped me navigate this entire mess, the one person I thought was on my side. And now everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed was in jeopardy because of him. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked, my voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. "What do you want?" "I want you to know the truth," the voice said. "But you can't let this destroy you. There's still a chance to make this right. You've got the evidence and you've got everything you need, but you need to act fast. Cohen, John's not going to stop. He's already covered his tracks well, but there's still time to bring him down before he gets away with it all. The line went dead, leaving me in stunned silence. My hands trembled as I put the phone down, the weight of the revelation crashing over me. It was as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. Eric had been bad enough, but to find out that John, my John, had been playing both sides, it was more than I could bear. I felt like I was drowning in the lies and betrayals, and for the first time in a long time I wasn't sure where to turn. I had trusted John. He had been my ally, my guide through this storm, and now he was part of the storm, but there was no time to grieve the loss of yet another person I had trusted. The game had changed again. The stakes had just gone higher. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and frantic research. John had been careful, covering his tracks with precision, but there were cracks, small details I had missed before, hidden in plain sight, and once I started looking for them, they became impossible to ignore. Financial records, contracts, emails. It was all there. The paper trail he had left behind was damning. I contacted my lawyer from another firm, a trusted colleague I had worked with before. He was shocked by the news, but together we started preparing for what was next. John had to be exposed. He had to face the consequences of his actions. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. John had already covered his tracks. Well, he'd been playing this game for far longer than I had known. As I walked into the courtroom, ready to take on my former lawyer, the weight of everything I had learned settled on me. Eric was in jail, but John was still out there, manipulating the system, controlling the narrative, and it was time to put an end to it. The final betrayal would be exposed, and this time there would be no escape. The day of reckoning had arrived. The courtroom was a place I had never imagined I would be, facing off against a man who had once been a trusted friend, a confidant. But now, as I sat there, the weight of everything I had learned about John, the web of lies he had woven, felt like an anchor pulling me under. He had been part of this entire scheme from the very beginning, playing both sides with such precision that I had never even seen it coming. But now, there was no turning back. I glanced across the courtroom at John. He sat there, composed as ever, his eyes cold, a smirk barely hidden behind his practiced facade. He looked nothing like the man I had once called my ally, the man who had helped me gather evidence, who had listened to my frustrations, who had acted like he was on my side. But now I saw him for what he truly was, a manipulator, a liar, a traitor. The judge called the court to order, and the proceedings began. My lawyer Thomas was prepared. We had everything we needed, the damning evidence, the financial records, the emails that clearly showed John's involvement in Eric's criminal activities. It wasn't just a business betrayal anymore, it was a deep personal attack on everything I had worked for, and now I was going to make sure John paid for it. As the trial unfolded, I could feel the tension in the room. John's defense team tried to discredit the evidence we had presented, but it was all too airtight. The truth was undeniable. The more I listened to their arguments, the more I realized how deeply John had dug himself into this mess. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had destroyed a part of my soul, a part that for the longest time I thought I could rebuild. But now I saw it for what it was, a part of me that was forever lost. Finally, it was my turn to testify. As I stood up and made my way to the witness stand, my heart was pounding in my chest. This was the moment when I would expose everything, the moment when I would show the world who John really was. Cohen, please state your name and your relationship to the defendant, the prosecutor asked. I've said Cohen Jameson, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. I was the defendant Sedum's client, and he was my lawyer, my trusted advisor. But now I said I'm here to tell you the truth about what he Sedum's done. The room was silent as I laid out the facts, the financial discrepancies, the forged signatures, the blackmail, and most damning of all, the emails that clearly showed John's involvement in helping Eric embezzle money and manipulate me. The evidence was clear, and with every word I spoke I could see John's mask cracking. I trusted you, John. I said, my voice quieter now, but the anger still simmering beneath the surface. You were more than just a lawyer. You were family. You were someone I confided in, someone I thought was on my side. But you used that trust to destroy me. John shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't speak. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. He had been caught, and in that moment I realized something. Justice wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at those who wronged you. It was about the truth, and the truth would set me free. As the trial continued, I could feel the tide turning. The defense had no answers, no way to refute the mountain of evidence we had presented. It was only a matter of time before the verdict was delivered. But even as the prosecutor wrapped up his case, even as John's fate hung in the balance, a part of me was still unsettled. Was this really it? Was this the justice I had been fighting for all along? When the jury returned with their verdict, I could feel the tension in the air. John's fate was sealed. But that didn't bring me the satisfaction I had expected. He had been exposed, humiliated, and convicted. But the victory didn't feel like a win. It felt like the end of something I had never fully understood. Guilty, the foreman announced. The room erupted into murmurs, but I sat there in stunned silence. It was over. John would be facing the consequences of his actions. But for some reason I couldn't find joy in it. There was no triumph in seeing him led away in handcuffs. No relief in knowing that I had won. It was just empty. After the trial, I walked out of the courthouse, my footsteps echoing in the cold silence. The weight of the last year, the last few months, pressed down on me. I had fought for justice, for the truth, for my family. But now that it was over, I felt a strange emptiness. I had lost so much, and in a way, I wondered if I would ever truly find peace. When I got home, Alex was waiting for me. His face was still guarded, but there was a softness in his eyes now, something I hadn't seen before. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the doorway waiting for me to speak. "It's over, Alex," I said quietly. He nodded slowly. "I know, but what now, Dad?" I didn't have an answer. I had fought for this moment, but now that it was here, I didn't know what came next. I had exposed the lies, destroyed the enemy, and fought for everything that mattered. But in the end, it wasn't just about the victory. It was about the cost, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to pay it. "We rebuild," I said finally, my voice firm. "We move forward, and we don't look back." Alex stepped forward, his arms open. "Together, right?" I nodded, my heart swelling with hope. Together.